Welcome to the Gentleman's Guide to Gaming and part 2 of my They Came From Classified recap. That's right, I am running They Came From Classified for one of my many Patreon groups, and as I ran this session, well, only yesterday as of time of recording, it's still fresh in my mind. So let's get to it. You might recall that in our previous session, after having their debrief with Big X, the head of the agency, he keeled over dead. They had just been told that they needed to make their way to Valverde and interrogate Monte Carlo, a villain often in the operation of Phantom or Smirch or Stench, because it was Monte Carlo who would be able to reveal who the leak was within the agency. Unfortunately, as he conveyed this information, or conferred it, he keeled over dead, apparently poisoned. Our agents rapidly escaped from HQ because they didn't want to be fingered with the blame, but that may be too late. Now, one of the players was forced to leave the session early, and so we decided that her character was still in the building. She was still in R&D because her character is a quartermaster, and having received the coded message from her compatriots who are currently hiding out in Hammersmith, working on their cover IDs, that they all need to get to Valverde, our quartermaster, Priscilla K, is currently working on acquiring some not inconsequential technology to help her cover ID. She wants to go to Valverde, the villainous hideout off the coast of Spain, with some weapons, some tech that she can sell to the Amore Armory, Tex Apocalypse's outlet on Valverde, where all kinds of criminal exchanges are made. So while she's securing these things, she gets a visit from one of her fellow agents, one of my characters, Charlotte Johansson. Agent Shayo is her code name, as it turns out. It seems that in the past, Agent Shayo and Agent K had a liaison, and Agent Shayo sat on the edge of her desk while she was working on her tech and said, "You may have heard there's some things going on upstairs. Rumor has it, in fact, that Big X is dead, and that your team are being held responsible." And Agent Shayo leaned close and said, "If you're looking for a new team, we've teamed up before. I'd be happy to team up again." There was various innuendos made about the last time that they shared a dirty martini together, which apparently is a euphemism, and God knows what for. But Priscilla used this as an opportunity to try and find out what information she could. From Shayo, it does indeed appear that people in the agency are looking for her compatriots, and they are directly blaming them for the death of Big X. So, after summarily dismissing Shayo, but with the possibility of dinner or drinks later, Priscilla K made her way out of HQ with a few choice weapons, artifacts, tech pieces that they can sell in Valverde, make for an excellent arms dealer cover. So things like nerve agent, lipstick, and the like. But yeah, truth is, the agency appears to be turning on the agents. And while Priscilla K was finding this out, back in Hammersmith HQ, well, not HQ, Bolt Hole, our other characters were busy working on their cover IDs. For example, Agent Bob, the best operative of Bermuda, otherwise known as Agent Boob, is planning on heading to Valverde as using his actual ID. He is a Bermudan Olympian, and he intends to go there effectively as our eye candy, but as a drug dealer of this new stylish drug with the name of cocaine. Apparently quite popular in these parts. He is going to be accompanied by Davina Stryker as a potential medical student, knowledge on this elaborate new drug. Likewise, Agent Ophelia is eschewing all cover ID and intends to just speedboat directly to Valverde, be the pilot, driving them all to shore. While Frank Davenport, Agent Mirage, using his journalistic cover, all on the character sheet, for a lot of these characters, they all have these as their cover paths, is using his journalistic cover ID to write a story on the villainous organizations of the world. Maybe make them look a little better in the eyes of the international press. While all this is going on, of course, Agent Bob has been in touch with the consulate in Bermuda. His contact, one of his contacts on a sheet, is Mrs. White, who works in Bermuda in the Department of Records, and she is able to furnish him with sufficient paperwork that will back up his cover. Likewise, we have other characters arranging similar. When it comes time to leave Hammersmith and they decide they're going to meet up with Priscilla Kay in Paris, best to not cross paths in London while all eyes are open for them, they leave, and as they're heading to Frank Davenport's car, they succeed on a dice roll. Several of them do. Frank doesn't, but the rest of them do, where they notice a blinking light from underneath his muddy wheel arch. That's not supposed to be there, they think. That's not where a hazard light goes. And indeed, well, hazard lights don't blink. That's not where an indicator goes. And so, yes, Ophelia basically says, I've got this. If this is a bomb, I can disarm it. The rest of the characters make a wide berth, and they don't want to be around when Frank's beaten up old Jalopy, blows up. And so Ophelia goes in. There's a red wire and a green wire. For reasons still unknown to me, the player doesn't make a roll to determine whether Ophelia Knightley is capable of determining which wire will set the bomb off and which one will defuse it, so she just cuts the red one, and the car explodes. Thankfully, she then rolls a suitably dramatic outcome that allows her to somersault away while on fire, land in a fountain, stand up, look fairly elegant with it despite the burn marks and now the shorter haircut that she emerges with. Still, this is a signal. Someone wants them dead. Is it the agency? Is it Phantom, Smirsh, Stench? There's so many alphabet groups that want them dead. So they get on the next train heading out to Dover and then the ferry to France. Our characters liaise in the Champs-Élysées, and of course, as this is a movie of a certain era, Paris is right on the coast. It's using Robin Hood, Prince of Thieves logic for geography. So we've got the Champs-Élysées, we have the Eiffel Tower, and just right there is the Palace of Versailles. And look, Notre Dame Cathedral. And it's all within very close concentration. They disembark from their train and they're right underneath the Eiffel Tower. And right there, at a cafe, is Priscilla waiting for them, where a very friendly Parisian waiter is serving. And he remarks, it is a delight for me to serve such a beautiful English lady. Would you like a complimentary coffee for you and your friends? And while they think this is a little strange, they accept the coffee. And they have it poured, and they start discussing their next move. They need to get into Spain and then off the coast to get to Valverde. And then the waiter comes back, and he says, compliments of the house. Well, in fact, he didn't say compliments of the house. He said you're going to have to pay for it. I have some champagne de Paris. It's at this point that Frank Davenport, Agent Mirage's player, points out in character, well, technically it wouldn't be champagne if it's from Paris. The waiter's face drops. Agent Mirage is determined that that mustache he has under his nose isn't even real. It's concealing a smaller mustache. Exactly. It bings. It was a bell sound of recognition if you heard that. And Agent Mirage goes for the mustache. Critically fails, and therefore it is a real mustache after all. He's just tugging this man's upper lip. And this man is indeed an assassin. Pierre Le Parisien, one of the French villains du jour. And he was about to throw acidic coffee over all of them. And, of course, as his face is pulled, he spills the coffee. It starts eating through the table. The party goes to work. They start disabling him, while Agent Mirage is tugging him by the face. Agent Bob is smacking him over the head with a blackjack, and Agent Ophelia is rather pointlessly trying to shove a chair underneath his legs to get him to fall down. Unfortunately, it's a collapsible chair because she critically fails as well and just slides along the ground. Priscilla Kay uses this opportunity to look around, see whether there may be some other assassins. Maybe there's another bounty hunter or someone else observing, and sure enough, after getting something like 6 hits, which is ridiculous, she notices Joan Darcy, a common associate of Pierre Le Parisien, watching from the back of a Mini. How insulting. One of the French premier masterminds riding in the back of the car that is most quintessentially British. And so, as Pierre l'Imbecile is driven face first into the table, acid pouring through his wounds, and then falls over and grabs for a cloth to damp his face. They decide to spend a rewrite, so it is in fact a bleach cloth from a bucket of cleaning supplies, and then he is dripping bleach into his wounds, which doesn't exactly help sterilize matters. Priscilla and Agent Bob decide they're going to chase the Mini, while the other three of them get this guy to a hospital where they can interrogate him. And so the chase ensues. Around Champs-Élysées, they decide they're going to throw in a missing reel here. And now they're winding through the downtown streets of Paris, through a marché, of course, with fruit and boxes and books and other things that can fly up into the air. Look, a parade of nuns and so forth. And with some rather dramatic roles. There was a success, you see, then there was a failure, then there was another success. It required them to actually switch cars without actually being shot in the game. Because remember, this is a spy movie. At one point, they were in a cab that they had hijacked, and then all of a sudden they were in a Mini as well. It was like the Italian Job, but in Paris. They rear-ended the enemy Mini just as they put on their sudden brakes to avoid hitting the nuns. You know, there's some things villains won't do, and it's run over an entire gaggle of nuns. So, well, they'd put the handbrake on, and Joan Darcy was firing with a submachine gun out of their window at Priscilla, who was shooting with her custom Walther PPK. Both of them got hits off. They smack into the back of the car. Concertina's basically crushing Joan Darcy. The chauffeur is trying to struggle with the door. Agent Bob opens it for him and pulls him out, where the nuns give him a swift kicking, and they drag Joan Darcy elsewhere, just as the cars blow up in the background behind them. Meanwhile, we have our other characters. They have managed to secure some private time with Pierre Le Parisien, where they're going to interrogate him, and they do so, and he is actually only too happy to answer, given that they saved his face, what's left of it. He is now the melting-faced man, and he will return as a separate villain in a different feature. But he explains that he and Joan Darcy were hired, you see. They received an anonymous request, they and assassins all over Europe, to look out for these spies, these characters, to murder them, and then to collect their bounty by calling it in once they had committed the deed. Unfortunately, he didn't have the number, but Joan Darcy did. They decide, specifically Davina Stryker, our chief interrogator, she decides that rather than punish Pierre Le Parisien further, turn him over to the authorities, they're going to leave him be, and he might be a useful contact indebted to them later. And so she adds him to her character sheet. And they head off to meet with Agent Bob and Priscilla, who are currently interrogating Joan Darcy in the park. It's dusk now, there's not many people around, and while her legs are crushed and she's bleeding internally, it seems like an excellent place to interrogate her. Unfortunately, she's not really in a mood for interrogation, given the amount of pain she's in, and so after administering some medical aid, doping her, they get some answers. They find out the number that she was scheduled to call, and what's more, they decide there and then, because Agent K, our R&D expert, discussed earlier in the session how she had a gigantic mobile phone. It is the 1960s, it's pre-mobile technology, but as a quartermaster she can invent things like this. And was going to use this mobile phone, give it to Joan, and Joan can call in that the hit has been completed. Joan slurringly does so. The voice going me 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 on the other end basically says, well, we want proof. Yes, you can collect your reward at dawn in the Jardin de Palais Royal, but only if the press has reported on 4 dead British nationals. Well, that's where our characters go to work in a montage. Hammering away on a typewriter, Agent Bob starts crafting Well, in fact, no, it was Agent Mirage starts crafting the most fantastic story. Everyone throwing in ideas of how, and I will actually find the suggestions here because some of them are frankly, well, in fact, all of them are frankly ludicrous, don't get me wrong. That bizarre incident in Paris. In fact, we have a headline here: bizarre day for English. And the newspaper article, which one of our players has now written up, says 4 visiting foreigners were assaulted and lost their lives over the past 24 hours in the City of Lights. One of the rude English visitors perished after demanding tea at a cafe outside of the Eiffel Tower and taking matters into their own hands, resulting in their unfortunate passing, to the delight of cafe staff throughout the city. Another pair died in a car accident they caused driving on the wrong side of the road. The Mini Cooper they drove exploded after the collision, killing one. Another attempted to flee but was stopped by a group of nuns, passing from the injuries he sustained. And so so they wrote their story, and using some of their contacts, because Agent Stryker is able to basically place contacts in places, so she used Le Monde newspaper. They got their story in the papers, sending Agent O, Ophelia Knightley, to go and pick up the ransom, maybe find out who's placing it. But most importantly, what they decided was they wanted the money that was going to be paid for their deaths. 4 of their deaths. And that is a crucial clue. Remember, the voice on the other end of the phone said, we want proof of 4 British nationals dead. Does that mean they don't think Agent K, who was in R&D at the time, is responsible for it? Curious. So Agent O went along mostly just to collect this money, because they're going to Valverde, they're going to need a lot of ready cash. There's a casino there, after all. She gets to the bench, sure enough, there's the case, there's the money. She looks around, she scores something like 7 hits on her roll. This was a game with a lot of swingy rolls. There were lots of dramatic failures and lots of grand, exceptional successes. And I basically passed it over to the player, given the sheer number of successes, to have some directorial control. That there was bundles of cash amounting to around £200,000 worth in various denominations. It was her decision. Likewise, she wanted to be able to see the person who put it there, but not to the extent that she would be able to identify them, because the player decided, well, let's not blow the lead entirely. I added a little to that. You see, if you remember James Bind from our first session, the most superlative agent in the agency, most famous, infamous, you could say, known the world over, he was there in a pond of ducks, a wooden duck on his head, watching as Ophelia Knightley took the cash. And as she made eye contact with him, he made eye contact with her, said, "Oh, bugger," and disappeared into the water. And all of a sudden, he's taken the pipe out of the pond to his secret escape, and the water starts swirling away, all the ducks disappearing into the pond, and Agent Bind is gone. What does this mean? Agent O came to a conclusion. This isn't Phantom who are trying to kill us. It's not Stench and it's not Smirch. It's the agency itself. Why else would James Bind be observing this pickup? The agency wants us dead, and they've hired assassins here, Bruges, Brussels, Madrid, Barcelona, everywhere they might go in Western Europe. They're going to have to think very carefully about how they get to Valverde, that's for sure. That is the end of our session. Session 2. What will happen in part 3 of Operation Rainfall, and will rain ever stop falling? We'll find out next time. Thank you very much for watching.